Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday Interactive for the Erudition Network. My name is Eddie Phillips. I am your host of this interactive. We do this every Thursday at around 5 o'clock. I apologize for the few minutes of delay. We had a problem with the camera, but we are on and live, and everything seems to be very good with the broadcast and the stream right now. If you are new to this program, this is an interactive Black History session. And what that means is that I encourage you to drop questions into the chat. You can reach us on Facebook. We're actually on a couple of different things tonight. We are on Twitter. We are on Twitch. We are on YouTube. We're live. We're in a lot of places tonight. We're trying to expand that as much as this platform will allow us to do, so that we can reach more people. If you were with me last week, you know I put out an impassioned plea last week to say that we really needed to focus on history, particularly Black history, and everything that goes along with that. We need to stop ignoring our history. We need to stop believing that somebody else is going to teach it, because it is showing in our society that that is not going to happen. And in fact, there are agents and elements in our society who are actually fighting against that. So we do this interactive. I've done this interactive. We're just about at 2 years. I think we're about 2 weeks from 2 years right now that we have been doing the Erudition interactive. And I do this. I get on. When I say we, I mean Erudition as a whole. The network. We try to provide you history that we believe, that we know, I'm going to say believe, is important. I thank all of you viewers who stick with us and are faithful, and you are here every week to share your thoughts and ideas and things with us, because I think that is so important to have that interaction. As I said, this is what this is for. Drop whatever questions, comments, concerns, whatever you have in the chat, and we definitely will answer. Mike, I see you on here. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Sean Anthony, I see you're on here. Thank you for joining us. Teddy, I see you're on here. Thank you for joining us. What I want to talk about tonight is going to kind of be from the interactions that I've had over the last week or so online. Different people have sent me, people always send me, and I encourage this. They always send me comments, concerns, and things online, asking different questions and highlighting different things. And so I want to kind of try to tackle some of those things tonight, because there have been a couple of them that have come up that are so hilarious. And we need to start going in here and what did I call it? I think I said last week, it's a fact attack. It's a fact attack, right? But we need to do this. There's so much out here that is just lunacy. Last week, I on our page and on different social media things, I went on and I spoke about a particular thing. And I don't know if any of you all, someone sent me a comment, I never heard of this, but I had seen different people get on social media and talk about this thing called the Devil's Punch Bowl. Now, here's the funny part before I get into this. The funny part about this is that people are putting that stuff out here, particularly about the Devil's Punch Bowl, and they're conflating, or they're intermingling, right, things together that actually aren't the same thing, right? They're not the same thing. So when we talk about what they call the Devil's Punch Bowl massacre, What we're really talking about is a story made up, and I think I did cover this last week. But if you weren't, I'm gonna give you a little bit of background. What this was about is that there's a story that the Devil's Punch Bowl happened supposedly in 1865, and what this was is that Southerners who had abandoned and basically did not take care of disabled, hurt, ill slaves. So they came up with a lie to justify their inhumanity. And the Devil's Punch Bowl is actually a Southern revisionist lie. It was conceived by Confederate lost cause revisionists, such as William Archibald Dunning and others. And what it was to do was to say that Black freemen could not trust the Union. We need to understand why this was, because what was done was that Ulysses S. Grant, when he became president of the United States, sent troops down to impose martial law in southern states. Grant sent troops down because he wanted to make sure that Blacks had the opportunity, freemen, because women weren't allowed to vote then. But let me clarify that, because there's also a historical confusion with that. So what had happened? What had happened was that when slaves were freed and they were given the vote by the Constitution, this did not mean that Black women could vote just like white women couldn't vote. But what slaves did, which was different than I would say with other parts of America, with our Caucasian brothers, is that they used the vote collectively. In other words, the wife had a voice in her husband's vote. Generally, this is what was done. The family voted together, and this is one of the reasons why Grant was elected into office. He was elected based on Black votes. So because of that, Grant felt a certain way, right, for Blacks, freemen, and he made sure that they were protected. And as a matter of fact, Grant's one of his biggest thing was, let us have peace. Let us have peace. Right? So when Grant came into office, he wanted to ensure that Abraham Lincoln's idea of Reconstruction, we're going to get back to that in a minute too, was respected and upheld. So in doing that, he was able to do a very good job of making sure this was done by troops. Now, I ain't talking about the Grand Canyon. Even though that is crazy too. But what Grant wanted to do is he wanted to make sure that people had the abilities, right, to exercise their vote. And this was done effectively. Now, here's the problem. When folks came up with the Devil's Punch Bowl that you keep seeing, people are quoting this stuff for Black history. This was an attempt to undermine that effort, to make Blacks think that you can't trust the Union soldiers and people who are there with you because they too harmed you during the Civil War. This was the lie. But what was not shared was that these Southern troops, right, in order to push slavery further, what they did was they left the enfeebled, they left the sick, they left the hurt, they left Black people, Black slaves, to die. And they left them in the hands of the Union to take care of them. And one of the places that this happened was in Mississippi. And this became a public health issue where older slaves and sick and enfeebled were dying. They were dying. Now, when we share this as Black history and we say that Union soldiers killed 20,000 Black people or starved them and tortured them, we are regurgitating a Southern revisionist lie. And we don't talk about the actual massacres, the actual unfortunate things that that happened during the Civil War. When I was talking about this, I was telling people, you're not talking about the Ebenezer massacre. You're not talking about the Pillow Fort massacre, where black soldiers were massacred and killed by men who will eventually go to establish the Ku Klux Klan. Right? That's real history. That's factual history. And so I wanted to touch on that again. I know I did a little bit last week, but I want to touch on that because we got to do better. Good evening, Pastor Ray. It's good to see you. Black History doing Black History Month. Yeah, I agree, Tina. We should. Who is this? All right. Thank you for that. But look here. Look here. We got to do a better job of telling our history. And the only way to do that is to be honest with our history, to actually stop conflating. And so I wanted to cover that again, because I know we keep doing this. And unfortunately, it's hurting us in our body, our approach to it. And I don't want us to continue to do that. Another question that I had that came to me, well, didn't come to me, but was brought to me this week was Black health. Black health. Black health is a horrible thing, especially with Black men. And so a question was given to me about how do we address the issue of Black men and their health. There is a historical issue with Black people, specifically Black men, where we don't trust doctors. And one of the things that comes from, you can obviously say that it comes from slavery. Black men were worked to death. You can go and look through history, and you can see how Black men were worked to enfeeble. And I'm trying to speak about this in a very humane manner. If I want you to think about the fact that Black slaves didn't have health care, obviously. And even though they were property and they were valued, right? They also were an issue. I'm going to give you an example. If you had a horse that broke a leg that could not serve you in a way that you wanted it to serve you, it was hurt beyond its ability to further do its tasks. This goes along with the idea of what was going on and how the North profited from the slavery of the South. And I'm bringing this up because here's the thing. When Blacks were hurt, injured, a lot of times they were abandoned, sometimes put to death, sold off to basically work in some labor camp or some other capacity until they died. But most often they vanished. I don't know any other way to say it. They vanished. And they vanished because of the insurance. We have history to show that slave owners cashed in on insurance. They were insured by banks in the North. And those banks in the North paid on dead slaves or slaves who had been lost or slaves that the slave owner claimed had evidence to suggest that they died under some kind of cause that they could cash in on. It was better money to get that money that way than to not get it at all. So when you have a people who have gone through something like that, they don't have a trust, right, in you that you're going to be fair to them. So what they do is they start to mistrust doctors and people who say that they're out there for their health. They stop listening to that. And that is passed on to us ancestrally through generations. We're still having that problem. That trauma that is still manifesting in us that makes Black men, even though they know that they may not be able to live long. They may die. They don't want to go see doctors. We have high issues of high blood pressure, diabetes. These things have been with us for centuries. I had I believe it was my sister had made a comment online that she didn't realize that the BMI scale, the body mass index, was predominantly for Caucasians. It is. And the idea of stripping your body down in a way that is incongruent to the idea of what Black people historically, you don't have to be 400 pounds, but you also don't have to be 150 pounds to be healthy. And in fact, stripping down this weight to a point where we injure our kidneys because we have hereditary issues that are a part of us that have nothing to do with what we may have done to our bodies ourselves, but more things that we've inherited. More than, I believe that the study was 2 out of 10 Black men at one point, I think this was a couple of years ago, it may even be higher now, had high cholesterol issues, right? I think it was 3 out of 10 had some form of pre-diabetic condition. This is in the ages of just out of being a teen. So these things stay with us, and they're historical issues. There are historical issues for the diet that we had to intake, our ancestors had to intake, and there are also historical issues for our inability to go and seek help. Now, I'm going to give you another factotum here, and I'm not suggesting that segregation is what we should go, but I'm going to give you a fact here. When there were Black doctors in Black communities who could prescribe and treat Black people, a lot of times the health was better. I'm going to say that again. You can go and look at it. A lot of times the health was better. The Southern poultices and the way that people treated, the old Southern understanding. I think I told you all a few weeks ago that there were slave owners and masters who would go to go find a Black woman or a Black, what's the term to better use? I don't want to use their term, but basically go find someone who could create them a potion or a poultice that could heal and cure their people. These things weren't taught to them by American slave owners. These are things that they bought from Africa that they knew how to treat certain wounds and injuries. And these were prized people. And just like with any enslaved people, when you have a position where people come to you and they use you, you eat better, you feel better. And so a lot of that comes from that, right? We go to our own understanding. But a lot of those old tactics and issues and things that we learned, that our ancestors learned over time, got stripped away from us. Over time, by certain laws and statutes in the state, you could not go to a slave or go to Black people to get medicines, because the idea that maybe they would poison you or kill you. But that didn't stop some from still trying to do it. They just made it illegal. I don't mean to be ignoring you all's comments. Let me get back to see some of you guys' comments. As I said, this is an interactive. Let's see what you guys got here. I don't know why it took so long to click. Okay. Tina, what is the Ebenezer Massacre? Okay, I'll go into that a little bit. Give me a moment. Black men tend to not get informed about their loved ones when there's ill. Why certain generations are more open about their health now, but not. There's still a hang up with Black men who are dying earlier than anybody. And I'm not just talking about outside sources and killing them. I'm talking about their own health and how they keep their health up and how they hide their health issues from their family. Tony, absolutely. Think about our sisters in the military who are thicker than our white counterparts and how they, yes, say that again, Tony, and how they judged them and how they made them feel inadequate, secondary, wrong, and actually processed some of them out of the military, even though they could run and they can run 2 or 3 miles. They could do all of the things everybody else could do. Typo, older generations of Black men do not tend to inform their loved ones when they're younger. Well, as I just said, some of that comes from the idea that, they don't trust. Idea if I go to the doctor, now they're going to tell me that I'm going to die. I don't want to hear that. Right? If I keep working, I'll work it off. And there was actually sayings, and you hear some of these sayings, people work it off. So, well, you asked about the Ebenezer Creek Massacre. It happened in December 9th, 1864, during the Civil War. When the Union, what would happen during the Civil War is that the slaves would actually follow Union soldiers. And when Sherman, right, William Tecumseh Sherman made his march towards the sea, and this is when he was going towards Savannah. There was a long line of soldiers and military folks as slaves who cooked the meals and cleaned the officers and the soldiers' uniforms, and were there because they were so grateful with the idea of being freed, and they felt safe with the military around them, were trailing them. Well, during this issue at Ebenezer Creek, Sherman did not want slaves following them. And there are many different reasons why they say that this happened. So what they did is there's a thing called a pontoon. A pontoon is basically a flotation bridge that is made so that the military can go across and they can bring their cannons and different things across. Well, when this happened, they removed the pontoons before the slaves or the freemen could get across. And the freemen, in panic, thinking that they were going to be captured, ran into the creek. Many of them could not swim, and they were held down, and they were bogged down, and a lot of them died. The numbers are, as always, played with, but hundreds of slaves we do know died at Ebenezer Creek, trying to follow the Union Army because they knew that the Confederacy was coming up behind them. And that is what the Ebenezer Creek Massacre was, Tina, to answer your question. But that is an actual valid thing in history. Janarius, good to see you. I got a lot of your stuff. I haven't been able to look at all of it, but I do thank you, my brother, because you keep sending me things that we need to talk about, right? Things that we need to be focusing on, things that we need to start to to look at, and especially when we start getting false history, especially when people start telling lies on social media. I appreciate all of you who keep sending that to me and give us things to talk about here on the Interactive. Pastor Razor, healthcare is a very complicated issue. So most of the Western medical standards are set based on testing when European subjects, discounting the physiological differences in humankind. When my friend from Africa spent time with me in the States, his blood pressure went up and the blood vessel in his eye burst. But he refused medical Western attention and started doing what he knew from his culture at home. He got better almost immediately. There is much truth to that. And I'm happy to thank you for sharing that, Pastor, because here's the thing. I'm not telling you that Western medicine, medical practices are always legit. And when you almost have to get to a point of foolery when you consider the fact that many folks, right, sound like Donald Trump, that many folks, they died, right? They died based on things that doctors did for prejudice and racist and bigoted reasons. So if you look at that situation, yeah, I can believe that you would do better with overseas or West, or Eastern medicine. Matter of fact, I'm gonna give you guys an actual point on that. I had an incident when I was in Bahrain, and I was afraid because they took me into the hospital and they wanted to make sure I wasn't having a heart attack, and they did all of these things. And I'm thinking, man, I'm going in this third world hospital that they don't know what's going on, right? And I'm in the Navy at the time, and I'm saying to myself, what more are they gonna tell me than the Navy could? But they actually did a lot. And the doctor, the African doctor, came up and told me, he said, you know what it is? The medicines that they gave you are not suited for this environment. It's hot. They gave you medicines that work as diuretics, and they're depleting your water. And it's hurting your kidneys. Now, when I went back to the Navy and I told the doctor that, she was like, well, and sure enough, one of the doctors eventually came back and said, yeah, we need to reduce that. Maybe you shouldn't be taking that. And I laughed because, again, I got better treatment from a doctor in what they consider to be an inferior country, right? That from them than I got from actual American doctors, who one of them actually told me during that time, of full disclosure, I got to do what's best for the Navy, not my health, what's best for the military. So understand that people do things for what they consider to be best for somebody else. I told my sons, we were talking the other day, I said that word for that is obsequious. Yes. As my wife says, you like to use these $10 words. That means obsequious. They're doing things for other people. And in this country, we run into a lot of that. A lot of that. And so it is something that we definitely need to talk about. And I'm glad that we went into that a little bit. Hey, while I'm on here, I'm keeping this interactive today because that's the thing with Black History Month. I'm sure there are questions, thoughts, and concerns and issues and things that people want to talk about. If you have a question or something that has to do with history, please feel free to drop it in the chat. And as we are now streaming in 2 different places today, if you're new to the audience and you come in, please feel free to drop it in and leave us a comment either on any of those channels. And I promise you, we will get back to you. Remember, there was a blood pressure medicine that lowered blood pressure in Caucasians while causing Black people to sweat. Oh, yes. Cinepril. Yes. And that is a good point, too. Janaris, I've actually heard that. But I will tell you this. If you look at the pictures of Dr. King, and this is maybe more graphic than some of you all want to hear tonight. And if you are, please, I apologize. He was shot. The bullet came in through here, went down, and because it was a help me out here, one of the bullets that shreds. It caused major damage to his spine and came out the lower part of his back. Even at Dr. King, even if he would have lived, even if they were able to repair that type of damage, he would not have had a quality life. He would have been paralyzed. He would have never been able to speak again. And so there are a lot of parts. Thank you. I appreciate that. Issues with that. So, and here's the thing. When the intent is to kill, now, and I just tell you this from a military perspective, when the intent is to kill, you're going to make sure that you kill. John, whoever that is, Toussaint Louverture. I assume that you're talking about the Haitian Revolution. Is this what you're talking about? And so, again, there is so much stuff out here that is often wrong. And people's, how do I say it? They don't mean to make up things. They just regurgitate what has been put out here. And unfortunately, what we are seeing is a lack of historical understanding. But I'm here. Is that what you're talking about? All right. What is it that you want to know? Do you want to know that who he is? You want to know? Give me some specifics, because I could go really, really deep into that. Okay, well, I'll tell you this. So, Louverture, and I hope I pronounced that right. My French is not that good. Was born a slave, in what we now consider to be Haiti. He was one of those. He was born there, but here's the thing about Louverture, right? Or Toussaint. Let's just call this, because I'm not going to keep trying to massacre his name. He was born in Saint Domingue. He was enslaved, but he was also very, very smart. Even at a very young age, he was very smart. He was very religious in his religious belief. And what you will find with people like that is that they have a better understanding of, because they could read the Bible, they could understand things. They have a better understanding of the world. It's one of the reasons why slaves, even here in the Americas, were told that you could not read. You read more. Pastor Race has been doing a thing talking about the slave Bible. They didn't want you to be smart. Whereas Toussaint understood, he read that Bible. He read also some of the Enlightenment thinkers, the ones who we claim inspired the George Washingtons, Ben Franklins, and all of these different people. He also read Machiavelli. So he understood a lot of things. He understood also how to inspire and grow people. And so his major point in pulling off the Haitian Revolution is that I really believe, this is from my reading, I really believe that he was underestimated. Him and many other people were underestimated, because you don't believe that these slaves are that intelligent, that they can understand battle, that they can understand military tactics and theory. And so his ability to rile up people and to be able to get them to follow comes a lot from his education. Haiti is still being punished for making a fool of France. Haiti is still being punished for that, but other things too, right? You have to understand that the Haitians were able to push off the French and the English. They were able to beat Napoleon's army at a time when Napoleon was considered to be unconquerable. So when you're able to do that, when you're able to pull that off, that does something to people. That makes the folks think, oh, wait a minute, what is really going on? But unlike some who decided they were going to stick it out, Napoleon realized this is not worth it. It's not worth it. It's one of the reasons why we have the Louisiana Purchase, why we have that huge swaths of land that came with the Louisiana Purchase, because the idea that, hey, you know what? I'm not going to stick around and fight this war. This is not going to be something that we are going to be able to do effectively. And then when you look at what came of that, right? Does anybody realize how many states came from the idea from the purchase of the Louisiana Purchase? Give me one or two states, any of you out there, one or two states that actually came from the Louisiana Purchase. I don't care. You can go look it up online. I'm pretty sure some of you are going to do that. But things that came from the Louisiana Purchase. See, our feed's acting a little weird, but anybody? Anybody? Louisiana? Colorado, roughly 10 states. Utah. Said been too long, huh? Missouri. Yes. Montana, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, where I'm at in Colorado, Missouri, Iowa. So we got a lot, even going all the way up until just at the cusp of what we now consider to be Canada, right? Right out of Saskatchewan up in there. There was a lot of land that was basically got before that. And what did that lead to? So that led to the expedition of Lewis and Clark, right? To go across and to go into these lands. But this happened because of what? It happened because of the idea. Honestly, historically, we can really look at it and say that the Haitian Revolution caused Napoleon, plus his other wars and things he wanted to do, to have to give up that land. And that benefited America. It also caused a problem in America because what it did is it then put us into the situation where we're then again arguing about slavery and the expansion of slavery. And should slavery continue to expand into other lands? If I'm cutting off of you, please know. I see that we had a little bit of our stream was doing a little bit of strange things, but please let me know if I'm coming in good, and I just keep. But I just want to make sure that you actually can hear and see me, making sure everything is good. Sending stuff to my background staff, my son, really, to go check and make sure everything is okay. When you have a house full of people, sometimes folks want to do other things. So, you know. All right. You guys are doing pretty good with these questions tonight. Yeah, thank you, John. I do know it's a little choppy. It seems to be getting back right now. Whatever was going on, it stopped. Manifest Destiny, yes. So, any other questions? I tell you what, I will promise you this, John. I will go further because we can go really deep into the Haitian Revolution. And for the purposes of the time that I have left right now, I won't do that. But we can go really deep into that. I will tell you. Do you have any? I'll ask you this: do you have any books? Have you read any books on Haitian Revolution that that you may have in your possession? I can give you some suggestions on books that you possibly could read that will probably help you, especially if you want to know about how it came about and how it was successful. And I can do that for you. You say you own the Black Jacobins, but that's it. I think that there's so much out here. What I tend to tell people is that when you go back to go, this is something that for all of you, when you go back to research history, when you go in and you want to find out things about history, I think the best thing that you can do is don't try to go get the most modern book, right? There's so much free stuff, especially for you millennials out there online. There's so much that you can pick up and read online that is free. You can access libraries in England, France, Scotland, anywhere, all over the world. There are free libraries online. So go back as far as you can. Don't go get the book from 2002. Go look for the books that were written closer to the time that these people lived. Sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you can't find those works, but a lot of times you actually can, right? Go back and get you one of the biographies that were written. There is a site that I'm going to tell you to go to. It's called Documents. I'm going to put it in there for you. Documenting the American South. And basically, it gives you a whole lot of books and things that were written by writers. Now, here's the thing. Qualify the writer, too. There's a book on Toussaint that was written in 1863 by how's that cat's name? I know it's in there because I think I have a copy of it in my library. But I'll look it up for after the show and I'll put it in there for you. But go to DocuSouth and you can go in there. You'll find there are a whole lot of free books for you to be able to read. And if you don't want to read it offline, they will at least give you the idea of where to go get your books from Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, or whatever. Oversaturated info with biased views. I don't know what you're talking about right there, Janarius. I'm going to see if I could get that up for you because I really want you to be able to utilize these books. All right, let me put this in here. Both parts. Sorry, you all. I'm typing this in. All right, I have. Here we go. All right, here's a good thing for you to go look for. Here you go, right here. That'll help you. That's the website. As a matter of fact, that'll take you straight to Beard. That's the guy. To go to Beard's book, and they'll be able to pick that up for you. And it can also give you some other things. And if you have any other questions, I know I have at least 3 books on the the Haitian Revolution. Also, why it's in my head. Thought it was over here. Maybe I moved it. There's another book. I'll put it in there for you. I love books, and I have too many of them. But I tried to do a lot of more stuff digitally online. I know how many. All right, so that's that question. I didn't know what you're talking about right there. You said oversaturated info with bias. I also see you said Native American women and the slave led to Lewis and Clark's success. You know what actually led to Lewis and Clark's success that is not spoken? It's not necessarily Sacagawea, because it's not Sacagawea, it's Sacagawea. It's an important part to remember. We mispronounced her name. That was the name that they gave her. That's the best way that they could pronounce it. So they gave her that name the way that they gave it. The books were written in a matter of omit or eliminate the ROs and historical accounts. Here's the thing about that. I agree with you. I have to go, but I'll be sure to check out the resources you gave me. Thanks. I'll check. Okay, cool. And hey, as always, feel free, come on and ask any questions. We're here every Thursday. Thank you. So I'm going to go into this right here. So here's the thing about omissions. I'm not going to tell you that every book is truthful, because that's it's not. But what it should do, history is a puzzle. History is a piece. You put everything together. That's why when you read, if you read the Bible and you read the Bible and you know the Christian religion and you know what the New Testament tells you, but you never picked up a atlas or a globe or a map to go look in that area of the world, then you may be missing something when they talk about a certain area of the world. And if you don't time period. So what it is you have to be able to put history together. You have to look at it not even with your own biased eye. You can't look as said the slave was there to the slave was here. Okay. Here's the issue. The indigenous people in the area we talked about with the Louisiana Purchase and going across the Americas were not alien to Black people. Lewis and Clark would have never been successful without the indigenous people that they took and some of the Black people that they took. And let's not just say one slave. Because a lot of times, as we found out, you all really about Estevanico, during the Spanish as they came over, a lot of this had to do with the fact that they used Blacks and indigenous people as the go-between. The other part that a lot of people don't realize is that language, spoken language, is only one part of the communication. A lot of the indigenous people and the slaves, the Maroons, communicated with Native Americans through hand gesture. Through gestures, here's the thing, that they had learned, that had been passed down, and they could communicate and had similarity. This, again, is history that we're not taught. That we're not taught. Hand gestures that communicated what was being said beyond the language. What is often not talked about also, especially as you look in Florida and in some of the southern areas, was just how close to some African languages those different meanings for different words were. I want to go into that one day, and we can actually get into that. Very similar. We are under the idea that the French and the Spanish, and then somewhat the English, brought language over here. And that's not true in its entirety. A lot of the language that was shared before they ever got over here had African roots to it. I'm not making this up. I was looking for that book. I just read this book. Great book. I think think this is it right here. Just finished it recently. From John Thornton. It's called Africa and Africans in the Making of the Atlantic World, 1400 to 1800. This is a really good book. It's a great book because what it does is it doesn't try to lie to you, as Jadaris was just saying. It's not trying to give you theory. It's actually quoting and stating historical things and facts. It goes and it looks. I'm going to show you something here that I found interesting when I first read this book. It actually shows you, right, West African states. It actually talks in 1625. It talks to you about how Africans were already in the Atlantic, right, and how they were helping people, sailors and folks in the Atlantic. Notice from 1400, right? We're not just talking about post-Columbus. And so, again, when you go and you read, you need to go in with an open mind as if you didn't know, and then empirically go in and start asking questions. Because the Moors stayed for several centuries. Well, that's a whole other thing too. We can get into that also. The Moors did, but they also were the reason why I did. I've read Columbus's notes, his diaries. I've also looked at the fact that Columbus, you know, people think, as I've said many times before, he came over here by himself and he just found this. Now, it was not an incident, as people like to make it seem. He, in fact, had a map. He, in fact, had a way, and they knew where they were coming to look for. Because remember, Columbus had interactions with the Portuguese and the Spanish. And Portugal also had interactions with Arabs because the Portuguese did business with the Arabs. So now when we talk about the Moors, if you look at the 100 years just before Columbus came and what the Spanish and the Portuguese tried to do to blacks, the Africans, you will see through the Ensancho del Negro that they restricted Africans from owning and people who were of the Moors, right, from having property, being educated, because they wanted to push them out of their society. But that didn't mean that they got rid of the knowledge and the information that they bought with them. So yes, that's a great point to bring forward, because we need to know that. And I assume you're talking about the Piraeus map that actually shows coastlines of America. That is also not in history. So this was a great session, especially because I like to take questions off the cuff. If there's something that I didn't answer fully, please leave it in chat, and I'll come back and I'll give you the best answer that I can, and always give you a place to go grow your knowledge. I appreciate everybody who showed up and signed in tonight, asked questions, and I apologize for this little bit of lag that we're getting. We have a little bit of weather here in Colorado. We'll try to get that resolved next time. If it's not the weather, I see that we keep dipping in our feed. But overall, I was very happy with this set. Let me take this last 5 minutes to tell you all something. We are under, I think, I don't know if Pastor Rage is still on here, but I had posted the other day how serious Black history is to this world, and that it is an attack. We have young kids walking out of class, out of schools, because their schools are telling them that they can't talk about history beyond the 1970s. We have young people who are anguished because they can't talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Medgar Evers. They can't mention Frederick Douglass in an aggressive manner. It has to be anything that Frederick Douglass said that was non-confrontational. They can't talk about Denmark Vesey. They can't talk about Nat Turner. They can't talk about John Brown, right? They can't talk about the Red Record from Ida B. Wells. They can't talk about her chapter on burning of black bodies. They can't talk about Josh. They can't talk about any of that. They can't talk to you about the history of a people who helped to grow this country. That is an attack on us. That is an attack on us. And though some people keep saying that it's guilt, it's not guilt. They teach these things. They brag about these things. If you go and you look at my, and I'm going to pull it up for the last few minutes. If you go look at my slideshow that I gave you all months ago, and I keep going back to this because it is so important. If you look at my slideshow on the men who deceived America, you will notice all of these writers, all of these people, George Fitzhugh, Walter Cox, Dr. George Stanley Hall, right, who created the American Psychological Association. If you go look Upton Sinclair, who was a liberal, but still wrote about Negroes rubbing shoulders with sweet girls, right? Thomas Nelson Page, right, who wrote the Two Little Confederates, another revisionist, who was actually a part of the government. He was an ambassador in Italy. If you go read Robert Shufelt, The Negro, The Menace to American Civilization, William B. Smith, they know their history. They know it. They have been taught it. Woodrow Wilson was a professor. They know it. Thomas Dixon wrote The Klansman. And so I understand what you're saying, Janarius, but what I'm saying is that when they play that card that they don't know that it's guilt and that that's a lie. The Klan has always had an education component to it to teach them why to hate. The alt-right got together and they do conventions and they talk about the supremacy of whites based on their Anglo-Saxon mentality. So it is exactly shifting the narrative. But here's the thing. When we look at it and we see our own, we're shifting the narrative too. One of the reasons, and I'm going to give you guys about 5 more minutes. If you have to go, I understand. But one of the reasons that we are having so many problems with our history and the way we teach our history is the suppression that we put in our own communities. Our inability and our non-desire to teach our children where they come from, because it no longer allows us to control. It makes you think. There should be no reason that children should not have been able to read the works of Malcolm X, of James Baldwin. People say that I don't want my kid reading James Baldwin because he's gay. There's no more brilliant black man in the history of America than James Baldwin. Because you didn't share Paul Laurence Dunbar's poems, or you didn't share Langston Hughes's poems, because you didn't understand what the Black Renaissance in Harlem was about, because you saw it as something that should not be passed, because the church said it was not godly. And we lost our history. We lost our understanding. We lost the ability to understand the numbers game, the lottery that's giving people billions of dollars. When they were running numbers in Harlem and all over the country, black people having to remember them numbers in their head. Go read the autobiography of Malcolm X. Stone Cold geniuses. but you don't understand. And so you say, that's not my religion. That's not my background. I don't want to give this over to these folks. I love W.B. Du Bois. I've many of his books. But I don't forgive what he did to Garvey. What he did to Marcus Garvey was something black men should never do. You don't undermine your brother when he's trying to help you because you don't like him. It's important that we do better. Eric, yes, we actually can. About 3 minutes, another hour. But my point to you all is this. Every Thursday I'm on here, and I'm going to try my best to teach as openly and as conclusively as I can. That is just my nature. That is who I am. And I'm going to encourage you to ask questions and to challenge things that don't sound right. And I'm going to give you the reason why, and I'm going to tell you where to go to help you with your understanding. Please feel that link that I gave to one of our viewers. Go to DocuSouth, the American South. There's so much free information on that site. That's just one of many. There are libraries all over the world. Authors, people, you can get this information and you don't have to go pay for it. And you can grow your knowledge. And then we can come together and we can discuss it. And we can all learn together. I really, really enjoyed this session. I hope you all got something from it. Eric, I'm sorry that you came in a little bit late. You can join us next week. It's one of my brothers from the Navy. But I hope you got something from this session, and you take something with you, because we're in a fight right now. We're in a fight right now. I wanted to share one other book, and that's what you guys saw me clicking around earlier. Oh, a few weeks ago, I talked about the Maroons. I want you all to go, and I thought I shared this book. It's called Slavery is Exiles by Sylvia L. Diorf. It's a really good book. And as I get further in the next couple of weeks, we're going to keep going further into this indigenous people and the connection between blacks and indigenous people. Because I think that's a part of our history that is not covered exclusively. What'd you say? So Eddie, we are always told history is always told from perspective from the winners. How do we know? How do we know where to go? Good question. To try to do this in a minute. All right. So history is often written by those who have conquered and won. That is true. The way, as I just said earlier, the way to go into history is to go into it and get as close to the primary source as possible. The primary source is the person that lived it. If you can't get the primary source, go to the secondary source. Those who lived around that person, those who knew that person, those who actively played a part in their lives. This is how you get to know the truth. Not history that's laid out in a history book by people who didn't live in that time. I said earlier before you came on, Eric, the best thing to do is to try to go as early as you possibly can. I have so many books in my collection that come from the 1500s, 1600s, 1800s, 1700s, right? And I read that to try to get a better understanding. Then you will know as you go in what the historian is looking at. Now, you also bounce it off what was going on in the world at that time. This is why you need to know, you have to bring other things in together, right? Geography, the layout, science, all that plays a part. History is not just one linear thing. It's a combination of things, and it leads you on a path to understand a lot. Hundreds of ships left, never to return because they stayed thousands of years before Columbus. A lot of them stayed, and a lot of them went back. We know this to be the case because here's the thing also. Human beings follow coastlines. Human beings follow coastlines around the world. This is why they came up with that Beringa theory on the map. But when you look at as a sailor, as a Navy sailor, when you look at the winds and how ships travel, It's not unbelievable. It is, matter of fact, it's probably more believable that Africans came, right, from the west of Africa and traveled over, right? It's easier to look at that and see that that's a possibility than somebody coming all the way from Europe, to get over to the Americas. But then again, that's a question. That's a discussion for another time, as they've modified and manipulated our maps to make Africa look small compared to or equal in size to continents that are completely smaller than it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I've been on a lot longer than I was going to be. Thank you all again. Hey, come back and stick with us. Next Thursday, I'll be here. Tina is on Mondays for mental health and talking to you about how to live a more adroit life. I thank you, my brother Jamal. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you. Barnacle bonds are way closer in Africa. Hey, we need to do that. Okay, Eric. I'll give you one more question because you came in late. Everybody else, if you got to go, I know people got things to do. What's your question? Seriously, what's your question? We do have a thing that we call overtime that we do. I told Tina that we can do where we can go a little bit longer, but I also understand that people don't have too much time to spend listening to me talk about history all night. We usually will go an extra 30 minutes, but I'll put it to you guys. If you want that, I can stay on here for a couple of more minutes and we can go over some other things. And those who got to leave on, you can feel free to go and do what you got to do and come back and watch later. I'll do that since there are questions and people came in late. What you got? I'm waiting. I know you type faster than that. And I'm not even clowning you because you know I could. That's my little brother. Cancel culture. I talked about cancel culture a little bit on you must be talking about the thing that I put out. We could go into cancel culture. I'll see. Maybe next we'll see because it's a lot of things that I would like to talk about coming up. And we can go into that. Because I do believe that is, well, you sent me a message. It is a big part of our problem right now. But what we actually term as cancel culture and what cancel culture actually is. Cancel culture to me is completely canceled. Done. You're not coming back. Not that your feelings were hurt. Not that you were angry. No, I mean completely canceled, right? Canceled. It bothers me how we talk about counseling because counseling means to cancel something means to totally wipe it out, to destroy it, to negate it, right? And so when people talk about cancel culture as because they didn't like that somebody said something, that blows my mind. Cancel culture is telling people what we're seeing right now. You can't teach history. Let's stop that from happening, right? Those types of things where you pull it out. Book burning, assaults. So you're talking about on the ship. Yes. So yeah, but you can, when you teach people, it's an agenda to silence, shame, and control. There you go. But at the heart of it, it's about control. How do I control the narrative? How do I control what is being said or done to benefit me so that I can feel smarter, so I can be more wealthy, so that I have more power over someone? When the issue of power and control come in, then we have a problem. You know, when you go and you look at, you talked about the Anzio, right? Being on the ship. When I would try to teach young sailors like you new information, people tried to stop me. Not everybody, but the folks in charge don't want to lose that control. Here's another part of it too. They don't want to learn anything new. That's another part. If you're so biased to the idea that you don't feel you need to learn anymore, you can't be taught, then you have shut yourself out from wisdom and knowledge. Was the counseling effective? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because in the end of it, you have what I try to teach here. You have to have the wherewithal to understand what is at the heart of it. And you have to think empirically. Ask the questions, when, what, why. Why is probably the most important question. Because if you could ask those 5 W's, right, then you start to understand, why is this person doing this? Who's doing it? What was it for? When did they decide to do this against me? And when you ask those questions and you think that way, you find ways around their closed off thinking. Because you will often find that cancel culture people, they have closed off thinking. Feminine traits pushing down masculinity, which is to use logic and reason to address the issues. So here's the issue with that too. If you have, we approach things differently. We approach things differently. I have found that men, boys, tend to be more physical. Not saying that they all are, but more physical, more aggressive in their challenging and learning. And so I had a sailor, female, who would go out and tell people, sailors that were under us, go off on them. She particularly did this with Black men who she felt, I would say, threatened by. And so I had to pull her off to the side and tell her, well, why are you hollering at them? Because it's the only way they understand what I'm saying. So she said. I said, no. Because she was under the idea that it had to be aggressive. And she overcompensated. And what she did was she turned people off from even wanting to listen. You have to meet people with the understanding of that there are parts of our learning process, right, that happen. But then you got to meet people on who they are too. And often a lot of us don't do that. So why were you tired to be canceled? Why are we canceling others? Nobody likes anything. Change is hard for human beings. Change is something that human beings don't. Tina, I think, she had a show recently. She was talking about that. They pull away from that. Because change means I have to do something, I have to learn something, I have to put more effort into something, and I've done all of this work. Why should I do more? When you look at cancel culture on a historical basis, let's look at slavery. Here you got whites and blacks, right, symbiotically working with each other for hundreds of years. You separate that. Legally, you separate it. And now, for generations, we've not had to till the fields. We've not had to work this hard. We've not had to do any of these things. And now I got to go out here, and not only do I have to go do it for myself, I got to compete with the slave labor that used to work in my field to do it for me. And that change was massive. And what people did was, that's when you start having lynchings and murders. Because folks said to themselves, I don't like this change. This is ungodly. This is not right. This is not how a society should run. We weren't trained to be like this. We weren't told this is the way it was going to be. And so we cancel out those people. right, who want to go along with it, and then force the other folks who watched it, who don't want to be canceled, to go along or get back in line to what we were doing before. So the wherewithal to continue to push change is important, and it's hard. It's hard work. It's stressful. It makes you just want to quit, but you got to do it. Because if there's one person that can benefit, then you do it. Black men and women didn't die after slavery just because they wanted to die. They wanted to live. But they also wanted better for their families, for their communities, for their progeny. They were looking into the future and not focused on where they are. That's how you get away from cancel culture. You push it. Slavery has never been abolished. Chattel slavery was abolished. We still have forms of indenture too. Look at the military. People who basically say, I'm going to follow your system and live in what you do to work. Even when we look at the Constitution, slavery is not necessarily abolished because people who are in prison can still be put to work against their will. The other night, when I think it was last week when I was on, I was telling you all that, and I want you to, before we get off here tonight, I want you to think about this. I was looking at this book and I was going through all of the historical documents that people say are important to America. The Mayflower Compact, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, the Federalist Papers, even George Washington's first inaugural address, and so forth. So the Monroe Doctrine, all of these documents, all of the Star Spangled Banner. If you were to go through America's documents, even up until modern time, ask yourself, when you look at these documents, how often are Black people the catalyst for these writings? The catalyst, right? I was looking here the other day, Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce Surrenders. That's an interesting history of Chief Joseph evading the cavalry and using maroon routes to stay away from the United States cavalry. And again, this is 1877, showing how important our ancestors have been. When you look at the women's rights, the 19th Amendment, 1920, could not have been possible without the rights that were given to Blacks. As a matter of fact, some of the abolitionists were also women's rights advocates. And when the Black man was able to be freed and got to vote, a lot of white women's rights activists turned on Blacks. Suffrage, yes. So when we look at this history of our people, it goes deep. Read Ronald Reagan's A Time for Choosing speech of 1964, right? Which is believed to be the catalyst of the modern conservative party. We are everywhere in this history. Bill Clinton's Don't Ask, Don't Tell. His inaugural address, on and on and on. There's so much documentation in America that is made possible because of the efforts and the fights of African Americans. All right, you all, I gave you some extra time. Thank you, Eric. I think my wife needs to see your lectures. He says people, People don't see race because until it's what's that? Till it's in their face, till they have to deal with it. The more we see, the more people intermingle with each other. That's always been the fear here in America. We say we want to be the mixing pot and all this and that, but we really don't want to intermingle. Some of us, we don't want to lose that power. Right? Yeah, I said it before. Race doesn't exist. The absence of color is black. So I tell people, right? so it's whatever. So if that's your idea, then that's what it is. The universe is black. So we all see color. I gave us those abilities to see color, or see race, right? As they said, because they call it color. Race concept is something that is made up too, something that we were put into in order to enslave us. That's a deeper conversation, and I would like to have that conversation. We'll do that. The idea of race. All right, you all. Thank you so much. We're starting to break up again. I will see you all next week. Until then, let me get off of here. And thank you all again for those who stuck around for this little extra time. See you guys next week. Thank you.